During his life between 1867 and 1916, Japanese novelist and English teacher Soseki Natsume overheard a student translate the English phrase "I love you" to a Japanese equivalent, "Ware kimi o asui." Natsume argued that the Japanese people of that time were far less forward with their romantic feelings and would never say something as bold as asui or love to one another as directly as his student had. He argued that the more culturally appropriate translation of the English term would be "Tsuki ga kirei desu ne," or "the moon is beautiful, isn't it?" as a more roundabout and poetic way of expressing one's romantic feelings. Tsuki ga Kirei, or As the Moon So Beautiful, is the name of a 2017 anime that focuses on the budding romance between two students in their final year of middle school. It's an anime that I love very much and would recommend to anyone who is a fan of the other shows I have covered in depth. Studying the show is going to be a little tricky though. With Takagi-san Season 2, I knew that each analysis had to build to the finale. For Toradora, despite not knowing what made it stand out, each arc still had an explicit focus that I could explore. Tsuki ga Kirei has a far less focused ending than Takagi-san and is far more subtle than Toradora. So when I say that this analysis series is going to be an investigation, I mean that I'm basically going to go episode by episode, poking and prodding at the individual bits until they begin to connect. I do have ideas as to what the show is building to. The sensational ending will impact my writing, as will the modern way our main characters communicate with one another. Also, before I get started, I got a quick nitpick. The CGI extras in the show are dreadful. Every shot they appear in is made substantially worse, and even in stills, you can tell that something is just wrong with them. I can appreciate that it was probably a necessary cost-cutting measure. Some of the show's more spectacular moments probably benefited from that extra budget, but these things are disgusting. But beyond how janky the crowd shots will be, the first episode exists to set up a few things. Who the main characters are, how they behave, and how they go from complete strangers to acquaintances. First, the narrative introduces us to Akane Mizuno and the mechanics of her anxiety. Anxious characters are nothing new to anime, but Akane ascends this trope in some interesting and, dare I say, realistic ways. We don't actually learn this aspect of her character until her second scene, as in the first she is with her friends and doesn't display any hints of anxiety. Even after finding out that she has been separated from her friends and club members by class arrangements, she's still calm enough to be distracted by the cute boy nearby. In her second scene, she stands in a bathroom handling a stress relief toy while psyching herself up to enter her new classroom. This ritual tells us that she has a self-awareness about her anxiety that many anime characters do not. She understands why she is stressed out and has a coping mechanism in place. A coping mechanism, mind you, with an object that she has with her so often that losing it becomes an important plot point next episode. When Akane does enter the classroom, she does so cautiously, choosing which door to enter carefully, and even then she doesn't actually enter the room until someone she knows calls her over. And once someone brings up a topic that she is passionate about, she appears to integrate fine with the new class. This quick transition from cautiously ghosting to immersing herself in this new social structure displays the layers of her anxiety with the unknown and how quickly she can find comfort in a like-minded crowd. Finally, we see her on the track with her club. It is in this club that the anxious part of her character melts away completely. She replaces her expressions of concern with determination, and she puts everything she has into running, despite it being an activity that she performs in front of onlookers. We briefly see Kotaro Azumi during the class allocation scene. All we understand from this scene is that he has friends who he is perfectly comfortable around, which makes for a decent contrast when the narrative properly introduces him shortly after, and we realise that he's a pretentious git. Okay, that's probably a bit harsh, but we are introduced to him narrating a pompous monologue about the social hierarchy in middle school. Now, I'm no stranger to pretentious monologues that start a narrative. However, this monologue fits quite well, as we learn in this episode that Kotaro is a writer and something of a hipster as he visits a bookstore to borrow a vinyl record. His passion for writing is an essential aspect of his character for the story. While he isn't comfortable enough with his work to share it with his friends, he does submit a manuscript to a writing competition in this episode. This attitude towards his passions and friends implies that he keeps them separate where he can, almost as if he is choosing to live in two different worlds. He spends his afternoon in the library, finalizing this manuscript. The only evidence that anyone but himself is nearby is a note from the librarian. Kotaro spends his afternoon separated from other people, as opposed to Akane, the nervous one, who spends her afternoon amongst a crowd of people. This behavior implies that Kotaro is someone who enjoys a bit of isolation. Social isolation is also nothing new to anime, however, the fact that he has friends with whom he gets on well and a social obligation tells us that he is someone who sometimes chooses to be alone and not a straight-up loner. The narrative then briefly introduces us to the families of our main characters. This scene can be tricky to follow with the multiple sets of subtitles, but keeping up with them provides insights into the family dynamics. Akane, for instance, has a broody sister who criticizes her father's indecisiveness, doesn't care when she is called out for being on her phone, and tells Akane that she's ordering too much food. Akane's sister is a source of advice in the narrative, some of which is appreciated, some of which is not, but all of it through the lens of a teenage girl who's a little vain and judgmental. Akane rebuts the insinuation that she is ordering too much by pointing out that she runs almost every day. At this point, we are made aware of the strong support structure provided by her parents as they tell Akane to eat well, since she is working so hard for her club. As Akane's parents are not a huge presence throughout the story, this moment is seemingly here to reinforce Akane's passion for track by showing us that her family strongly supports her. As for Kotaro, when he says that he wants to order the drink bar, his mother tells him he should stick with tea. This subtle detail sets up that Kotaro's mother isn't afraid to speak her mind when it comes to what she thinks he should be doing. Those who have watched the show will know that this aspect of her character will create conflict in the story's final stages. When the pair notice each other, Akane's nerves flare up again, as she suddenly becomes self-conscious over how much she is ordering, and leaves the table when her sister begins to tease her about it. We learn at this moment that Kotaro has something of a coping mechanism himself for times when he is nervous. This coping mechanism is quoting Japanese authors to himself. In this instance, he quotes Osamu Dazai, "How excruciatingly arduous and unbearable it is to live," which is the most melodramatic teen angst I have ever heard. Again though, this pretentiousness fits his character perfectly. This desire to appear mature to himself and others is accentuated when he runs into Akane at the drink bar and moves from the soda fountain to the coffee machine, despite not liking coffee. Some of you might be wondering why these two are already so nervous around each other. As far as I'm aware, it's just general awkwardness between two teenagers who are confronted with someone they find attractive. These two have already noticed each other throughout the episode, and I believe that a slight crush has developed. Not much, but enough for them to act nervously around each other. Akane's sister decides to cause a bit of chaos when she discovers that Akane's classmate is one table over. When Akane returns from the drink bar, her mother is at Kotaro's table introducing herself. I love this scene. It's such a small thing, Kotaro and Akane's parents meeting. It wouldn't seem like a massive deal to most, but because Akane and Kotaro are teenagers, this is about the most embarrassing thing that could have happened. I don't know why, but I just find that funny in an awkward, charming way. Their first encounter ends with Akane asking Kotaro to keep this chance meeting a secret. Kotaro's acknowledgement that she finds this embarrassing but not her sports club highlights that Akane is only nervous in specific situations. It also implies that Kotaro would be far less comfortable showcasing a passion to a group of peers than running into a crush. Now that the narrative has introduced the main characters to us and each other, it's time to start bringing them together. The way the show does this is somewhat arbitrary, but I kind of love that. These two weren't fated to be together because they're both outcasts or have perfectly complementary personalities, but because they happened to run into each other one night and then happened to get put into a large group together. The equipment group tasks Akane with getting his line details to add him to a group where they can communicate instructions. There's a problem though. She has now started to really notice Kotaro. She sees that his hair curls up on top, a detail that she could have only realized from observing him closely, and gives him the cutesy nickname Curly-kun. Now that she has noticed him, talking to him has become more challenging, especially asking for his line details. Kotaro has begun to notice Akane as well, we realize when he visits the bookstore I mentioned earlier to borrow the vinyl record. He sees that the author he had quoted earlier in the episode has written a book called Schoolgirl. While it is very cringy that this Dazai fellow wrote about girls having hearts embroidered on their underwear, I do like why this book's concept gets Kotaro interested. It makes sense that someone just starting to notice a girl for the first time would be interested in a novel from one of his favourite authors that claims to know how they think. I also love that the bookstore owner gives Kotaro a magazine on the house with the genuinely good advice that you should read all sorts of texts. It indirectly tells us that there are people who understand Kotaro's writing passion better than his school friends. It also implies that the bookstore owner is a writing mentor, hinting that his parents do not provide this mentorship. The first episode's climax occurs when Kotaro gets in trouble for not attending an equipment group meeting. Akane, who overhears this, realizes that she is to blame, as she was supposed to get him into the line group that would have informed him about the meeting. As nervous as she is to be around Kotaro, she understands that those nerves ultimately got him into trouble, so she follows him to the equipment shed. And what Akane does in this scene, apologizing and giving Kotaro her line ID, comes at a high mental cost. But she psychs herself up with the stress relief toy and conducts herself as more assertive than usual in this exchange. After finishing, she breathes a sigh of relief, reinforcing the mental cost of the interaction before offering to help Kotaro with his punishment. At this point, Akane appears to be more comfortable around Kotaro already, wiping dust off his back and lacking the anxious signifiers that had been present in their previous conversations. And the episode ends with Kotaro joining the line group and spouting another Dazai quote to himself in a moment of nervous excitement. The feeling of joy is like a speck of gold, glimmering faintly at the bottom of a river of grief. Still edgy, but at least this one's a little more cheerful. I cannot understate the importance that line will have on the rest of the story, but the first episode isn't about that. The first episode has built up our main characters. Akane is an anxious but well-adjusted girl who is confident in her abilities and takes responsibility for her mistakes. And Kotaro is a boy who, despite having friends, finds himself alone on occasion, and as an aspiring writer, can be a little pretentious at times. Their relationship began with an odd glance, got awkward when their families ran into each other, and evolved into acquaintanceship by the end. And that's important. Akane might be more comfortable around Kotaro, likely because he took the whole "it's my fault you got in trouble" thing remarkably well, but they aren't friends yet. We then get the ED, which is more substantial than the OP in a rare turn of events. The OP is serviceable, but it's just festival footage followed by clips from the preceding episode. The ED, on the other hand, is cute as hell and shows us some chat logs from Line. Lucky for us, a blog site called Brown Rice Cookies, which I will link to in the description, has translated the text conversation from every ED. Even though the logs don't become relevant to the overall show until right at the end, they're still sweet and fit thematically with the show. The first episode's line chat is between a girl and her boyfriend, who is jealous that she has gone to a drinking party. His main concern is that other guys will hit on her. Not gonna lie, this conversation comes off as a little manipulative from the boyfriend, but it at least shows by the end that his real problem is likely insecurity that he hasn't made it into uni yet. If you want to read it for yourself, I will leave a link in the description. And that's all I got to tell you about episode 1. I'd like to thank my patrons: Orion Tran, Lars Espen, Data52, Jaman5, Lemon Shark, Pix Caliber, Alberto Cruz, Tyler Bennett, Tenka, Jeremy Fashik, Fireclaw, and Soran. If you too would like to support the channel further, consider becoming a patron yourself. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.